We're brought here today by the love that Sarah and Davis share for each other.
We're going to be so happy.
We'll be so happy, and I'm gonna crush it at being a husband. Happy anniversary, babe.
Great idea coming here.
It's been an amazing year.
It sure has.
Wait, you do gifts on your anniversary? Why did nobody tell me this?
Did he forget my gift?
Quick, say something.
I also ordered you a gift. It has not gotten here yet.
I have a feeling I know what it is. I mean, I've been hinting pretty heavily.
Absolutely no idea.
So, there's been something I've been wanting to talk to you about.
Uh-oh. She caught me using the decorative soaps again.
Have you, thought about us having a baby?
Kids, we just got married. Are you serious? I can't create a human.
Yep, he's totally freaking out right now.
Crying, mess, noise, poop, lots of poop.
Honey.
Yes. What? I'm ready to think about having the
Why
conversation.
don't you open your gift?
Okay.
What?
We made a baby.
You're pregnant.
Yeah, I'm so pregnant.
Like how much?
Like 100%. Like all the way pregnant.
It's gonna be a boy. He's gonna be awesome. He's gonna play football.
It's gonna be a girl. She's gonna be my best friend.
I'm gonna teach him how to build stuff,
She's gonna do ballet,
throw stuff,
shopping,
break stuff,
theater,
burn stuff.
mommy's little princess.
He's gonna be my little buddy.
We're having a baby.
Oh my gosh. Yes.
We're gonna crush parenting.
I'm gonna crush it at being a dad.
Cheers.
Yeah, this is gonna need to be decaf,
Is that
if you
a
don't mind.
pregnant thing?
Well, good morning, everyone. Good morning. Hey, my name. Oh, I'm so loud. So sorry. We good? Hey, my name is Chance, and I'm the speaking and teaching pastor here at the Crossfire campus, and I'm so excited that you're here with us. If you're joining with us and you're new with us today, kind of good, kind of not. If you like the end of movies, you like spoilers, well, you're coming into the end of our message series entitled What Happy Couples Know. And now we're not pretending like I know or our team knows everything about what it means to be a happy couple, but we believe that God has given us some tools, some things that we can look at, that we can kind of dissect a little bit and understand to help us as individuals, as peoples, as couples, to be the best that God has called us to be. And so if you're joining with us today, you've come at the end of the story, you've missed 3 weeks of what we've talked about. And so what I want to do is just kind of recap what we've talked about for the last 3 weeks. And so some of you were like, man, I can't believe this series is ending. And some of the guys were like, I'm so glad this series is ending. Because my wife is talking to me about I'm just kidding. And so what I want to do is just, we want a series to continue to go on, but we just think this is the right time to stop. But I want to say at the beginning, I want to clarify at the beginning, I know that some of you have questions. I know that some of you have some things that are going on in your relationships personally that you're wondering how to apply what we've been looking at and talking about to your relationship and to marriage or whatever. And so if you're someone who has those questions, we want you to talk to us. We want you to email me or to email someone on staff here, to write on the connection card, to fill it out. But we want to be a people who can resource you in any way we can. Now, in fact, I've gotten some Facebook messages. I'm on Facebook, and you can message me. Now, let's be honest, I look at Facebook Messenger probably like once a week. So if you message me on Facebook and I don't get back to you, it's not that I don't like you, it's just I just don't look at it because I forget about it. But if you want to contact me or contact someone on our staff, we would love to talk to you more about some of the things, because I've been getting people who are asking me questions about their relationship and figuring out some things that maybe we can do or I can help them with in the midst of their journey. And so if that's you, wanted to let you know that we're an open door here and that we would love to help you and resource you in any way. Okay, so I just want to say something real quick because I see Mac and Jess right there. I just had a really funny experience with them just in the hallway, and it's a relationship thing, and I'm so sorry I'm calling you out, but I asked their permission. It was so funny because so I wanted to go to school to be a masseuse. Does anybody, you guys know that? I love giving massages, and somebody like, yes, my wife, she loves having massages. I bought her one of those portable massagers though for Christmas. How many times has she used it? 4 times. That's serious. And so I was massaging Mac's back out there, and Mac looks at me and says, man, that's a great massage. I love when you give me, because he was on a mission trip with us, I love when you give massages to my back. And he says, it's better than when I get it at home. And if you could have seen the look that Jess gave Mac, I was like, inside was laughing so hard, and outside, I actually shed a tear. It was so funny. So thank you, Mac, for providing that funny material for us for today. So I'm done sidetracking. What I want to do is I want to recap what we've talked about for the last few weeks. And so the last few weeks, we've really tried to dive in to help us understand more clearly what we bring into a relationship. Because the reality is, all of us bring something into relationships. We have our stories, we have our history. What we've titled them is, we call them our hopes, dreams, and desires. We all have hopes, dreams, and desires that we bring into a relationship. It means we have some things in our lives that we want to take fruition in our marriages and our dating relationships. We have things that we bring to the table. We have ideas of how many kids we want to have. We have ideas of what our house should look like. We have ideas of how we should spend our money and what that should look like. We have ideas of future, like kids in sports or kids not in sports, kids being academic. We have all of these hopes, dreams, and desires. We have expectations for who does chores and who doesn't do chores. We have expectations on who cooks meals, who doesn't cook meals. We have all these things that we call hopes, dreams, and desires, but we said that those hopes, dreams, and desires don't feel like that when you bring them into a relationship. When you bring them into a relationship, oftentimes they feel like expectations. And so you walk around in a relationship with your spouse or your boyfriend or girlfriend or your fiance, and you say, here are the things that are my hopes, dreams, and desires, all of which are most likely good things, but here are my things. And we dump them onto our partner's lap and we say, hey, you need to take care of all these hopes, dreams, and desires. And the problem is it becomes so weighty, so heavy, that it feels like expectation. That's what we talked about for the first week. And we talked about when we do that, we end up getting ourselves into this you owe me kind of relationship. It's like a debt-debtor relationship. And so owe me eliminates love me. And we don't want to have that kind of tension in relationships, because once you start feeling like you owe somebody something, it makes it really difficult. In fact, I would argue it makes it impossible to find true connection or true intimacy, because you're always trying to play catch up, and it's not healthy. The second thing we looked at is we learned that submission is mutual. We looked at this verse that that Peter wrote, and he talks about it in 1 Peter chapter 5, and he just talks about what does it mean to submit to each other. And he starts off with husbands, or wives, you're to submit to your husbands. But we learned that, we looked at the earlier verse, and what Paul was actually saying was not just for wives. He was talking to both, husband and wife, that we are to submit to each other. We are to put their needs before my needs. In fact, what we said is that one of the things that happy couples know is that a person in a relationship knows that I owe my spouse everything, I owe my partner everything, but they owe me nothing in return. And we said that could not make sense. Sometimes that doesn't make sense. But one thing we know that's true about happy couples is they don't make sense, because they're so happy. They understand that it's a submission game. They submit to each other, their needs over my needs. And it becomes this kind of dynamic that allows for your partner, your spouse, to be lifted up. And it allows for them to feel elevated, feel heard, feel valued, and allows for them to be able to experience intimacy that they've never experienced before. And last week we finished off with this. Sometimes we have to throw things. Now, some of you are like, I threw something at my husband last night, or I threw something at my wife the other day. So you've heard my story. Me and my wife, we threw clothes at each other. But what I want you to do is don't listen to just that. There's a context for that. And what we talked about was that God calls for us to give over our fears, our anxieties, our stress, our worries, all over to Him. In fact, 1 Peter 5:7 says we are to cast our cares, to throw our burdens, to give everything over to God. And the problem is, the tension that we find in relationships is that oftentimes we're not throwing our relationship issues, we're not throwing our hopes, dreams, and desires on God. We're throwing them onto our partner. We're throwing them onto our spouse. And that creates unhealthy relationships. That creates tension in marriages and creates tension in dating relationships. And Peter's concern and Peter's plea for all of us, dating or not, that all those anxieties, all of those hopes, dreams, and desires that you have, give them over to God. And so that brings us to today. So happy couples understand that we have hopes, dreams, and desires. Happy couples know that we need to be equally submissive. Happy couples know that we need to give things over to God. And the last thing that we're going to talk about, which is today, is that happy couples know that it's a choice. Happy couples know that everything that we do is centered around a choice. We have a choice of how we're going to respond. We have a choice of how we're going to enter and engage in a relationship. We have a choice that dictates what our partner or our spouse feels. And so we're going to talk about that today, but I want to kind of put that on hold for a second. And I just want to explain where we're going. And one of the things is the reason why happy couples are happy couples is because happy couples make the happy choice. A choice that is in support of their spouse, a choice that's in support of their partner. And so we're going to look at that here in a second. But what I want to do is I want to let you know that we're going to talk about some verses today. And it's verses that you have heard before. How many of you have ever been to a wedding? Some of you, if you're sleeping, you can wake up now. This is the raise your hand time. You ever have that perpetual feeling that the teacher's going to call on you when you're sleeping in class? Tell me, some of you, you've all done one of these before in class. So just wake up for a second, shake it out. How many of you have ever gone to a marriage before, or a wedding before? Okay, so we've all been to weddings before. And so one of the things that we hear oftentimes is a verse that is read from 1 Corinthians 13. Now we're going to look at that. But what I want to do is I want to prime you for what Paul is actually saying. Paul is the writer of this letter. In fact, there's 3 letters. We have 2 that we can find, but Paul writes 3 letters, 2 of which we have. And he's encouraging the people in Corinth. But what we don't realize, and we don't have this context unless you study it, Corinth was actually a hub of a pagan town. And pagan town meant like these people believed in many different gods. They had many different customs. They had many different beliefs. They didn't believe the way Paul and the followers of Jesus believed. They were polytheistic, which is a fancy, I'm in an Old Testament class in college, so they were polytheistic, and that meant they believed in many different gods. They had many different viewpoints. In fact, some of these people, they would do really strange things. They would sacrifice animals in different ways. They would try to please their gods and just like work to just serve them and please them as best they could. And sometimes they would sacrifice children to preserve other children. That was part of their religion. Sometimes they would cut themselves as a sign of worship. They would do just really strange things. And so this Paul guy, he has an encounter with them. And Paul has this encounter and he says, hey, listen, all those gods that you serve, if that's the way you want to go, that's not a good way, but I can't make a choice for you. But he said, I want to offer to you something that's a little bit different. I want to change the way you think a little bit. And so Paul teaches them about his God, about Jesus. He teaches them about what Jesus did on the cross, that he made sacrifices for him. That Jesus doesn't necessarily, Jesus is for us. He's not against us. Jesus wants to support us. He doesn't want us to feel like we're on our own like their gods do. We don't have to sacrifice kids. What Jesus says is, let the children come to me. So Jesus had this different way of thinking. And so Paul spent a lot of time with them, and then he leaves, and he starts writing letters. And in these letters, what Paul was trying to help these people to understand is how to live their lives. Because these people were starting to convert to Christianity. They're starting to convert to what they called following the way, or following Jesus. And Paul wanted to give them some instructions. And Paul is trying to teach them that no longer that they have to have this vertical relationship with God. In other words, no longer do you have to do everything you can to serve like a whole bunch of different gods so that they would give you something. Paul says, I want to change your thinking so that we live horizontally. In fact, Jesus introduced this idea, is that as God loves you, you ought to love the world. And so Paul is letting them know this. And so what's funny to me, or at least interesting, is that the verse that we're going to look at from 1 Corinthians 13 oftentimes is given at weddings, but it's not meant for weddings. Did you know that? It wasn't meant to be in weddings. It was meant for people. It was meant for people to understand how to live. And so the reason why I say all that is because I know some of you who are not in dating relationships, some of you who are still in high school, some of you who are not engaged or don't plan to be married, or maybe you're widowed or older in age and are not planning to remarry. You may think that some of this stuff doesn't apply to you, but I want to urge you to reconsider that thought. I want to encourage you to say, you know what? Paul is actually saying something to me, because when Paul wrote this letter, he wasn't talking about how to live in a marriage. He was talking about how to be a Christ follower and how we love specifically with people. How do we create relationships that are based upon the love of God, because God loved us, and so we ought to love others. But the interesting thing is I think that we apply that to marriage. I think that's a good thing. I think we ought to do that as well. And so that's the context. That's the big umbrella. I had to give you that just so you could understand where we're going. So here's what Paul says. Here's how he starts. He says, if I speak in the tongues of men or of angels, but do not have love. Now, this is going to pop up a lot. I want you to have it highlighted for a reason. If I do not have love, I am only a resounding gong or a clanging cymbal. So here's what Paul's saying. If I speak in tongues of the men and angels, and so the pagans of that time, they thought that they would kind of create their own languages so that they could seem like they had this interesting, unique relationship with God. It seemed like they knew what they were doing. They just had this unique thing, and so they would oftentimes make up languages, or they would say that they had this interesting conversation with the angels. And Paul Paul says, if you have all of that and do not have love, here's what you are. You're just a noise. In fact, you're not just a noise. You're an annoying noise. That's what a gong, a dong, dong. Paul says, you hear that over and over again. If you do not have love, and even if you are able to do all those things, which most you're not able to, but if you are, and you do not have love, Paul says, you have nothing. So he continues on. And then he says, if I have the gift of prophecy and can fathom all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have a faith that can move mountains but do not have love, I am nothing. And so Paul's saying, if I can predict the future, if I can have discernment of what things are to come, and I can understand every mystery in this world, meaning I have like this supernatural understanding, if for some reason I have that, plus if I have all knowledge, meaning if I am the smartest person you have ever met, if I have that, and I have faith that says I can move mountains, so like you literally can move a mountain, or metaphorically move a mountain, or spiritually move a mountain, but I do not have love, Paul says, all of that is nothing. I am a nobody if I have that. What Paul is saying, which I really find interesting, he says that if you're listening to someone who has all this knowledge, he says, I want to encourage you. Knowledge does not mean deep. Knowledge does not mean that they have this unique relationship that you can't have. Oftentimes, and I'm going to kind of put myself here on the line here, but pastors, people who do what I do, or public speakers in general, they seem like they know a lot, but if they don't have love, what they're telling you means nothing. What they're telling you means nothing. In other words, what I'm saying is if you want to know about me, just put me as an example. If you want to know if I have love, talk to my wife. Talk to my friends. Talk to the people that I connect with. And if they tell you that I don't have love, then what I'm offering to you, Paul says, is nothing. I'm a nobody. Paul says we need to be people who experience love. Okay, I'm going to explain more. He continues on. And then he says, hey, if I give all I possess to the poor, and give over my body to hardship, that I may boast, but do not have love, I gain nothing. Paul says, if you tithe, you give all your stuff over to the poor, everything that you have, all of these things, if you sacrifice your body for whatever, if you sacrifice yourself, you sacrifice all these things that you have in your relationship, you sacrifice yourself, but you do not have love, you have nothing. And the really interesting thing here is he says, if you do all of this, that you may boast. And the interesting thing is why Paul says that is because oftentimes in the pagan world, but interestingly enough, in Jewish culture and the culture where Jesus lived, this is why Jesus got so angry with the Pharisees all the time, is because oftentimes these people would do, pastors, rabbis, pagan worshipers, they would do a lot of these things so that they could get something. So that they could get something in return. The whole thing, some of you may know this, some of you don't, so I won't talk about it long. This whole prosperity gospel, that doesn't really work in our day and age. It doesn't work in that day and age. It doesn't work in general. Because Paul is saying here, if you give something to get something, you get nothing from God. If you're in a relationship with God, and you're serving God, and you're doing something to get something, you will not get anything from God. He says you will have nothing. You will gain nothing, especially that you may boast. That you may say, hey, look at all these good things that I've done. So let's put this in context of relationships. If you are doing something for your spouse in order to get something out of them, Paul says that's not love. Paul says that's not love. That's you manipulating the situation. And he says if you do not have love, and you try to manipulate your spouse into getting something from them that you probably shouldn't get unless you're doing it the right way, he says, then you will gain nothing. And he continues on. And then he says, love is patient. Whew, some of you are shaking like, do you not know him? Do you not know her? Love is patient. Love is kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. It is not proud. Love is patient. Love doesn't jump to conclusions. Love isn't about you. Love is kind. It sees the best. It doesn't envy. It doesn't get jealous. That's what envy means. It doesn't get jealous of what your spouse has, or it doesn't get jealous of what someone else has. Love does not boast. Hey, look what I did for you. Look what you did for me. Love is not proud, saying, I have it all together. Some of you in this room today might think that your relationship's all hunky-dory. But if we were to press a little bit, maybe I would argue that maybe some of us are being a little too proud. Maybe that we don't have it all together like we think. And maybe there needs to be an interaction with God that can help us to understand what pride doesn't look like in a relationship, but what humility looks like in a relationship. And so after this, Paul does something really interesting. Continue on. And so Paul just continues to drill just a little bit deeper. And this one, it kind of hurts a little bit, but it says, it does not dishonor others. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered, and it keeps no record of wrongs. I don't know about you, but I'm bad at this. I'm bad at keeping records. My wife and I, we have fights sometimes, and I say, do you remember when you did this, or when you said that, or when this happened? Some of you know what I'm talking about. Some of you are like me and say, hey, do you remember when? You keep record. Hey, you did this to me before, and so just because of that, I can do this. He did this, she did that. We keep records of the wrongs. But the thing is that love is not self-seeking. Paul says love is not about what you can gain. Love is not about what you can pull from your spouse in relationship. Love is so much more than that. Love doesn't dishonor others. It doesn't ridicule. It doesn't humiliate. It doesn't put our spouse on trial. It doesn't just convict them. It doesn't assume the worst of them. Love does not keep records of wrongs. And then Paul continues on. And then he says, love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with truth. Now, I'm going to say something on this for a second, and then we're going to save it to the end, because this is really tough. This is really tough. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices in truth. In other words, the truth, love does not assume the worst, but love assumes the best. Love does not assume the worst, but love assumes the best. Continue on. And then he says, and he just starts listing all of these things, which I think is really interesting. Paul just says, I just want to nail it all together. I just want to put it all together for you so you all understand. He says, love always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. Love always does these things. And some of you, when you see these, myself included, I see most of these like, yeah, that makes sense. But there's one up here that I struggle with, that I think most of us struggle with. I think there's one up here that we can kind of have issues with. And the one that I think that is the most challenging of these verses, of these words, is always trust. Always trust. What Paul's saying is that trust is the default. You trust your partner, you trust your spouse, no matter what. Hey, but they were late. They have to be up. No. They're late. There's a reason. I trust. Love always trust. Love and trust is the default in a relationship, meaning you do not assume the worst of that person. And so Paul continues on. I think there's one more thing that he says at the end here. Go ahead to the next one, unless I'm wrong. Okay, so here's what I want to do now. For the next few moments, I just want us to kind of shake it off a little bit. I know that was heavy, I know that was deep, and I know that's kind of challenging, but here's what I think is super important. I think all of us have expectation and experiences. We have expectations in our relationships, and we have experiences in our relationships. Some of you who've been doing this for 20 plus years, I totally understand. Some of you who have been doing this for like a year, you still have expectations and experiences. And what I mean by that is expectations, we talked about in the first week, are our hopes, dreams, and desires. The things that we're hoping for in our relationships, the things that we carry into a relationship saying, I want this, or I'm hoping for that, or if they could do this, or if they could do that. That's the expectations part. But if you've been in a relationship, you understand that it didn't take long for you to experience something different than what you were expecting, right? Does that make sense? Is everybody kind of on the same page with me? So you expected one thing, and your partner or spouse did the opposite. And so between expectations and between experience, there's this gap. There's a gap here in the middle. And that's the point of what we're going to talk about today. The gap is that we have a choice to make. We have a choice to make when our spouse doesn't meet our expectations. We experience something different than what they have told us or what we expected for them to do. And so here's the two choices. The first choice is this: believe the best. Believe the best about your spouse. We have a choice to say, you know what? They were late from work, but here's what could have happened. I assume I believe the best about my partner, or they didn't take out the garbage again. But you know what? Maybe there was a reason why they didn't take out the garbage. Maybe they were doing something that was more important, something more focused. You know what? I believe the best. When I get the whole story, when I fully understand all of the things that are going on, I will have a better representation. Hey, my husband, he left the toilet paper roll the wrong way. I hate that. That's me. Quit turning the toilet paper the wrong way, right? I assume, oh wait, but maybe there was something happening. Maybe his mind or her mind, they were distracted with something and they just kind of threw it on there because they were rushing to make dinner. Or whatever it is. Whatever you're expecting versus your experience. We have a choice in the middle. We have a choice to do one thing, believe the best. Second choice is this: assume the worst. I don't know where you fall in this expectations versus experience and the gap in between. But me, just being transparent up here, oftentimes I default to this. And if I'm being honest, I think most of us in this room oftentimes default to this. He was late from work. He doesn't want to help me. He just wants to keep his mind where he's busy and he doesn't want to help me with the kids or help me with the chores or do the dishes or make dinner. He doesn't want to do this. Oh, she was shopping again. She just wants to spend all my money. She just wants to do all these things. She just wants to make sure that we don't have anything. She's buying more clothes. She doesn't need any more clothes, assuming the worst. Well, you know what? He's out with his friends, and he said he wasn't going to go out with his friends. And you know what? He's just trying to avoid me. He doesn't want to talk to me. He doesn't want to spend time with me, assuming the worst. Or you know what? I heard what she said to her friend about me. And you know what? I don't know why she had to say that or what the point was. I assume the worst in the situation. They were late again. He was late again. She was late again. She did this. He did that. And it's so easy to assume the worst. But what Paul says, what Paul writes, is that we're not to assume the worst, but to believe the best. And so there was this study. I was reading about it a little bit, and there was a study by this guy named Marcus Buckingham. And Marcus Buckingham wrote this book that will help us with our point today. And so Marcus Buckingham is this guy who's really super smart. And what he decided to do is he was like, you know what? I want to study relationships. In fact, and I don't want to just study relationships. I want to study happy couples. And so Marcus Buckingham did a 20-year study of happy couples, people who've been in relationships for more than 20 years. But the interesting thing is that he wasn't doing a study just to get information. He was really trying to figure something out. And so Marcus Buckingham, he didn't take just average people who have gone the distance but are just there. He didn't take couples that hated each other. He didn't take couples that just didn't see eye to eye or love each other, or who got to the end of whatever their relationship is and just said, you know what? I tolerate him or I tolerate her. We're roommates. He annoys me. She annoys me. He said, no, I don't want to deal with that. He said, I want to find what the catalyst is in happy couples. I want to see what separates happy couples from unhappy couples. And so he started this 20-year survey, this 20-year experiment. He just said, you know what, let me figure this out. And so he spent all this time collecting data. And it was really interesting is that what he said is when he was interviewing these couples that were happy, these couples that kind of went through some rough times but really saw the best in each other, he said there was a lot of different things that kind of took place, or a lot of different things that really intrigued me, that were interesting to me. And he said, they had this kind of this vision, this picture of each other. And so I'm going to start putting them up here. The first one is that they believed the best about somebody, and so they created this illusion. They had this illusion in their mind that their spouse, or their partner, their relationship was the best thing they believed the best about whoever their partner was. They created this scenario in their mind to say, you know what? I know she does this thing, but you know what? I see the best in her, or I see the best in him. And so what started to happen was they said, you know what? I'm creating a scenario in my mind where whatever my spouse does, whatever it is that annoys me, or the mistakes that they've made, or mistakes they've made in the past, things I have trouble moving past, what the happy couples decided to do is they started to create themselves a scenario that says, you know what? I'm believing the best about them. And what started happening, as the researchers were doing this, what started happening is as the illusion was created, or as the illusion, they assumed the best, it created conviction, which meant they actually believed the best about their spouse. They believed the best about what their partner did or the mistakes that they could have made. And so it continued on. The conviction then led to something different. Conviction led to security. They believed so much that their partner, their spouse, had their best interest in mind. They believed so much that they weren't doing things just to annoy them. They gave them the benefit of the doubt so much that in their relationship, they felt completely secure with them. They felt safe. They felt guarded. They felt and guarded in the sense that they felt guarded together, like they were in it together. They felt a sense of security. And the interesting is, the security then did something really interesting. Security fostered intimacy. Security fostered intimacy between two couples. It created this intimacy, this bond, this trust. If I believe that they really have my best interest in mind, then if I feel secure around them, then I'm going to be able to trust. I'm going to be able to trust. And intimacy, we talked about it, I don't know how long ago it was when I was here, but like 6 months ago, we said intimacy is into me, you see. Meaning there's nothing in me that you cannot see. Meaning you see me for who I am. You know what? The reason why Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden were embarrassed is not because necessarily they were naked, it's because they were exposed. The badness in them, they could see in each other. The flaws, they could see in each other. They've never seen it before. And it created this sense in them to cover up. In a happy relationship, in a happy couple's relationship, security fosters intimacy, meaning you have nothing to hide. Meaning you can give whatever it is, the dirtiest, darkest secret, over to your spouse in prayerful discernment and saying, hey, here's who I am. This is all of me. And your partner doesn't reject you. Your partner says, thank you. This is what I wanted to see. This is who you are. Intimacy is created. When intimacy is created, then intimacy fosters love. Intimacy fosters love. If I trust my spouse, if they see all of who I am and they do not reject me, then you know what it creates? It creates this vacuum. It creates this energy to continue moving forward with love. And Marcus Buckingham said that this pattern was this upward spiral. And so it continued to go on. So then love will continue to create this illusion. Illusion created conviction. Conviction led to security. It led to more intimacy. It led to more love. And then love, it just kept going on and on and on. It said happy couples begin to believe it. Happy couples begin to trust it. And so I know that might be a little confusing. I've spent a week studying it, and you haven't. And so I'm just kind of regurgitating it to you. So I want to boil it down into like one sentence. Are you ready? If you have a pen and a paper, and you're in a relationship, or you're not in a relationship, if you have a friend, or you have a brother or sister, or you have an uncle or a grandparent, if you have some sort of relationship, which everybody in this room does, I want you to either take out your phone, take out a pen, whatever you need to do to memorize this, because this is important, okay? I'm overstating it because I really believe this is something that we all need to hear and that we all need to see. You ready? I'm going to give you a second to get your pens. All right, so you ready? Find the most generous explanation for the other's behavior and believe it. Let me say it one more time. A little bit slower, and I'm not trying to say that you're not intelligent, that you can't understand it, but it's a lot to absorb in. Find the most generous explanation, meaning look at your partner, when they let you down, if they let you down, when things aren't going well, when things are going well, when they've done it again, or when they haven't done it again. Whatever the situation is, find the most generous explanation you can find. What I'm not saying, don't lie to yourself. I'm not communicating that at all. What I am saying is, believe the best. Choose to believe that whatever it is going on in your relationships, whatever is going on with your spouse, give them the best benefit of the doubt that you possibly can. And then believe it. Challenge yourself to say, you know what? I believe that whatever it is that's going on, they have the best intentions in mind. And sure, they're not perfect. Sure, I'm not perfect. But I believe they're not setting me up for failure. I believe they're not intentionally trying to hurt me. I believe that they're doing something that's wrong, or maybe they should be doing better, but I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt and I'll let them explain to me what's going on. Meaning when they come home, don't just say, "Blah, this is what you did." It sounded like I was hurling. I don't know why that happened. What it is saying, "Listen, honey, whatever happened, and I want to believe the best. And here's what I'm trying to believe that you did, or that what was happening. Help me to understand. Give me the full story, the full picture of what was taking place, because I trust you. I believe in you. And I assume or believe the best about you, that you have my best interest in mind." This will change your relationships if you so choose to do it. If you choose not to, if you choose to assume the worst, you are going to set yourself up for failure. You are going to do what a lot of people call a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you choose to not believe it and not believe the best, but assume the worst, eventually the assumptions that you're making will somehow find their way to be true, because you have eliminated the possibility for your spouse, for your wife, for your husband to bring the best that they have to offer. And so when you assume the worst, you cripple them. You don't give them the benefit of the doubt. And it makes it very, very hard to have a relationship that's built upon intimacy and trust. And so please, this is not my study. This is Marcus Buckingham. Assume the best. Believe the best. And go from there. And now I know there are two problems. There are two things that we have to kind of work out. What did I call them? Two obstacles. That's the word. Couldn't think of the word. There are two obstacles that we have to think of. The first obstacle is who we are. What we experience. The first obstacle that we experience, or that we have to name and realize, is that we do bring some baggage into our relationships. Some of us didn't experience a good parent relationship. Some of our parents, they just didn't get along. They didn't do things well. They didn't do things right. It was a challenge. You saw a lot of things that you do not want to replicate, or you've seen something in them, and then you see that similar trait into your spouse, and you say, "Oh man, that's something that my parents did, or that I've seen before, my grandparents, and I don't want that to happen here." And so we have to acknowledge and name that is an obstacle. We bring our own baggage into our relationships. We truly do. We have the things that we've experienced can be a part of a problem, but we have to name that. We have to name that to our spouse. We have to name that to them and say, "Hey, listen, this is my experience. This is what I've seen. This is what I have had done to me, or I've seen done to other people, and I don't want this to happen to us." Because when you name that, it gives an opportunity to allow for your partner or your spouse to love you in a completely different way, in a better way, a more whole way, to say, "I see what you're saying. Let's work on this together." So we have to name the first obstacle is what we experience, but the second obstacle is who we are. We ourselves bring a lot of emotional baggage into relationships. Some of us have trouble trusting. Some of us, it's easier to assume the worst. Some of us make bad decisions and say stupid things that we regret. We're human. It's natural. It's natural for us to make mistakes. However, when we acknowledge who we are, we acknowledge what we bring to the table, we acknowledge what is in our hopes, dreams, and desires, it allows for us to be able to say to our partner, "This is all of who I am." And what that does is creates intimacy. And it says, "Hey, this is where I personally struggle. This is the thing that I've held on to so deeply that I've never told anybody before. This is the thing, the one thing, or the two things, or the thing that you know what? I don't want to do anything without telling you now, because I want you to experience all of who I am. And so you gave it over to God, and now you have to give the reality over to your spouse and say, this is who I am. This is what I believe. This is my struggle. This is what I think of myself. This is what I've heard about myself. This is where I struggle. This is who I am. And so, Paul continues on, and I want to list these things for you one more time. Love always protects. Yep, love always protects. You have a choice in your relationship to protect your spouse. You have a choice to help them feel secure with you. You have a choice to help create, foster, imagine intimacy. You have a choice, Paul says. Paul continues on, love always trust. You have the opportunity to give them the benefit of the doubt. You have the opportunity to say, you know what? I don't know what you were doing or where you were going or what this means, but I trust you. Love always trusts. Love, it always hopes. Meaning, love always believes that the best is yet to come. Love always believes that as I trust this person, God is going to do something in me, and it's going to give me the hope to see the best in you. Love always perseveres. I think Paul puts us at the end because oftentimes we resort to this first. But I think Paul strategically says these things in the order in which he writes them to help us understand. Protection comes first. Giving your spouse a benefit of the doubt in relationships and friends, that comes first. Hope for the best, that comes first. And then when all these things are aligned, it's so much easier to persevere. So much easier to continue on. Because you're going through these things first before you get to there. But if you flip it over and you're just trying to persevere without any hope, without any trust, without any protection, it makes it all the more difficult. And so, happy couples. Happy couples are people who don't have it all together. In fact, happy couples acknowledge and admit that they have shortcomings. Happy couples are aware of the struggle. But happy couples do 4 interesting things that I think all of us can apply to our lives. Happy couples name their hopes, dreams, and desires, their expectations. Happy couples equally submit to each other. I don't owe you, you don't owe me. I owe you everything, you owe me nothing. Let me give all I am to you. Happy couples take their anxieties, their frustrations, and they give them over to God. And happy couples choose. Happy couples daily choose to assume the best, to believe the best about their spouse, and not to assume the worst. And Paul says, in any relationship you have, love always protects. It always trusts, it always hopes, and it always perseveres when it is rooted and established in your relationship with Jesus. So Christian marriages, Christian relationships ought to have these things. You can do it. I know you can. And some of you say, but you don't know our history. You don't know what they have done. You don't know what she's done. I know I don't. And if I could continue on this series for another month that you guys wouldn't be upset about, I would do that. But let's be honest. We can talk about it and talk about it and talk about it, but it takes practical application. And so my prayer is, and I'm doing this in my relationship with my wife, we are having these conversations. What can we do, or what can I do to serve you? When we start to live that way, when we start to submit to our husbands and wives, everything changes. Would you pray with me? Father God, we are fully aware that there's just so much that goes on in our relationships, so much that goes on in our lives. And God, we want to acknowledge that we need you in the midst of our relationships. Whether in a dating relationship, a married relationship, an engaged relationship, whether in friendships, family, whatever that relationship is, God, we all experience those things. As people who believe in Jesus, as people who choose to follow you, God, help us to be convicted in a way that we will believe the best about people and not assume the worst. And that you would remind us that we serve you. Because we serve you and because you love us, we are able to go and serve others out of your love. And so God, may it be so for our relationships. May we choose every day to believe the best. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.